Welcome to the Putback on SNY.TV, a pre-All-Star weekend edition of the show. And we got two All-Stars here with us. We've got Ian O'Connor, New York Post sports columnist, has a long, deep knowledge of this New York Knicks organization, including head coach Tom Thibodeau. And we've got journalist and host Ashley Nicole Moss with the I Am Athlete show. And you see her all over the place, and she's one of the most passionate Knicks fans I know. So we're going to have a lot of fun over the next 25 minutes or so breaking down the Knicks. Obviously, New York going into the break with a big win over the Atlanta Hawks on the road, establishing a very strong road record heading into the break. I believe they're 17-12 on the road, and that's the best franchise record heading into the break, going all the way back to 2000, 2001. So a long time. And then the record overall, very strong. It's equaling or as good as the record for the 2012-2013 season going into the break. And you remember that year, Knicks winning a playoff series under Mike Woodson, a very strong team. So a lot to be excited about, I think, if you're a Knicks fan heading into this break in ways that you may not have expected coming into the season. And it starts to me with Jalen Brunson, who may not be going to Utah. Maybe he gets an invite because of the Jaylen Brown injury situation, but doesn't have an invite right now. But everybody around the Knicks feels like he's putting up all-star numbers. Ian, what do you think has worked so well for Brunson and the Knicks right now?
Just about everything, Ian. I think it's probably the best free agent signing in the history of the franchise. And I've been following the Knicks for the better part of 35 years. And yeah, it's a steal at $26 million a year, $104 million in total. I did not realize he was this good. I obviously saw what he did in the postseason with Luka and the Mavericks last year, but he's better than advertised. It's a great signing by Leon Rose. And as you know, and people of my age, I'm 58. We've been following the Knicks for a long time. They haven't had a point guard in decades that you could really believe in long term. And he's the first one to come along in a long time. I think of some of the guys who've played that position who've been distinguished players, whether it was Doc Rivers, Derek Harper, Chauncey Billups, Jason Kidd, even Jeremy Lin. These were short-term players for the Knicks, one and done, given their age or other factors. But here in Brunson, I think what Knicks fans can really be excited about is you have someone who can man that position for the next 10 years at a high level. And so, yeah, I'm a little surprised that he's this good. I knew he was good, but he's better than that.
Ashley, has he surprised you? What you've seen from him, has it surprised you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, when, the rumblings of the Jalen Brunson acquisition were happening, obviously I was somebody who already could see the talent that he possessed. When you watched him on the Mavericks, there were a little bit of concerns about the money, how that was going to go ahead and affect the Knicks' ability to build in other areas. But he has surpassed expectations, money aside, has surpassed expectations of what he could bring to an organization and what he can bring specifically to this organization. It's also surprising too, because whenever you implement a new player into an existing ecosystem of a team, you always expect some growing pains, right? You expect the chemistry to be a little bit off, people still trying to figure out how to play together, and that can go ahead and come with growing pains that I'm sure Knicks fans were almost dreading. But it seems like a lot of that has been minute or non-existent at all. He's really been able to be implemented into the system and function well, like as if he had existed in it for a period of time. The guys respond well to him. The fans respond well to them. They respond well as a unit. And it's just very impressive overall that somebody who has not existed as part of this team for X amount of time looks like he has been there since the very beginning. So that, I think, for me, is probably the most impressive thing.
I think you hit on a really good point, important point, Ashley, because you saw when Brunson had his number retired at Villanova a few days back, everyone on the roster was there. Coaching staff was there from the Knicks. Front office people were there from the Knicks. And I think that tells you a lot about how Brunson has immersed himself into the locker room and into the organization in a leadership role where, he's not a beat my chest guy. Oh, this is what we're going to do guy. I'm going to tell you exactly how good we're going to be guy. He leads by example. He leads by connecting with his teammates in organic ways. And so you see the whole group there the other night. And to me, that's emblematic of a team that it's a good locker room. They get along with each other, and that's important.
Right.
I mean, I go back to previous Knicks teams. There was a year where I think Tyson Chandler had a party to reveal some photography that he did maybe in the Jeremy Lin year after that. And like a lot of the Knicks were there. You could tell that it was a group that was together, that really liked each other. And then there was an event hosted by a player that next year, which was 13-14 when they were struggling. And not a lot of teammates showed up. So it seems like a minute thing, like in the grand scheme of things. But to me, that was striking that all of Jalen Brunson's teammates, coaches, everybody was there for that event. And I thought that this coming into this year was a make or break move for Leon Rose because of the way they had to clear cap space to sign Jalen Brunson, which was trading off players that they had signed the previous summer using some draft capital to do those trades. So if it didn't go well, I thought that things could have really gone sideways for Leon Rose and his group, but credit to them. I mean, they saw something that a lot of people around the league did not see. And you look at also Isaiah Hartenstein playing a big role in the Knicks treading water with Mitchell Robinson out, and then Josh Hart. It's very early, but he looks like another seamless fit for this team. So it's been a good run for that Knicks front office. And Ian, when you look at this team, big picture, what they can do, this year, where do you see them playing things out over the next 6 weeks? And do you think they end up a playoff team?
I do, Ian. And I think what would be important is for them to not only get in the top 6, but to get that 5th seed. Because I think this team can win a first round playoff series, and obviously getting to 5 out of the 6 hole where you might see Philadelphia is going to improve their chances. And listen, I think that needs to be the goal and the mindset. It's not just, hey, let's make the playoffs and stay out of the play-in tournament. It's let's win a series. This franchise has not won, or has only won one playoff series in 22, 23 years. And I think that has to be the mentality. That has to be the goal. I think it's doable. I think they can hurdle Brooklyn for sure. And I think outside of Milwaukee and Boston, those two franchises or teams are non-starters as far as the Knicks beating them in the playoffs. That is not going to happen over a 7-game series. But Philly, I think, is a possibility. The Knicks have obviously beaten them twice this year. Not likely, but I think possible. But certainly Cleveland. And I think that's a team the Knicks can beat in a playoff series. It would be a lot of fun with Donovan Mitchell on the other side, of course. And so I think that is the goal. That should be the goal of this team and fan base. And again, one playoff series victory in 22, 23 years. I was there in the 90s. That is not acceptable. And it's time for the Knicks to reverse that trend.
Absolutely agree. I mean, the goal of this team is to move the needle a little bit each and every year. I think that, a realistic Knicks fan is not expecting this team to win a championship tomorrow, but you want to see progress with the team that you do have, right? So it was getting into the playoffs that one year. Then the next year, it was a disaster. This year, it's about winning a series. It's about going ahead and making it known that, look, this Knicks team is making some noise and there's something happening here. It may not happen overnight, but it's happening. And I agree, with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving both being out of the Eastern Conference and now being the Western Conference's problem, then, that 5th seed is more obtainable than ever before. The Nets are a team that are going to have to try to figure it out. They have a bunch of new acquisitions. And although they last night they had a really good game, you don't know what that looks like, in the long term. This is a Knicks team that for the most part has been playing it together. They know each other. They know the ins and the outs, the pros and the cons of each of these guys. And the new, implementations into the system have, like we spoke about with Jalen Brunson, have happened so seamlessly that it doesn't seem like that's going to cause an issue down the line. So I think the 5th seed is more than obtainable, but like Ian said, you want to go ahead and get that 6th seed, 5th seed. You just want to go ahead and be in the playoffs and win a series. And depending on that matchup, it's more than possible with this squad.
I think whatever happens between now and then, Josh Hart's going to play a big role in it. And obviously he's looked good early on with the Knicks. Ian, I'm curious about your early impressions, Josh Hart, what you thought of the deal and what you think of the player.
Like with Brunson, better than I thought. So far anyway. It's early. It's a small sample size, but he looks like a perfect Tom Thibodeau player. He's a great rebounder for his size, one of the best in the league at his size, if not the best. Very good defender. Plays with a lot of heart, no pun intended. And the chemistry he has, obviously, with Brunson could be a real factor going forward. I think, too, he represents a bit of a threat to other people that if they don't raise their performance, perimeter players on the Knicks, he's going to take a lot of your minutes. And I think competition internally is always a very good thing. But it looks like he was an ideal trade deadline acquisition, a perfect Tibbs kind of player, and also a threat to some other guys on the perimeter who need to elevate their own performance, or else they're going to lose playing time to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you look at the closing lineups, and that's kind of my litmus test for how Tom Thibodeau values a player. You've seen Josh Hart closing early on in his Knick tenure. Again, it's been 5 minutes, but that's where I look. Is he taking away minutes from a Quentin Grimes, an Emmanuel Quickly, or an RJ Barrett in those closing minutes? I don't know if Tom Thibodeau would change his starting lineup because Josh Hart is here, but I look at the closing minutes, and that's where, to me, I see how the coach is valuing individual players. Ashley, your thoughts on Hart? Did you want to see the Knicks do more at the deadline, or were you satisfied with how it played out?
I'm always on the side of playing it safe unless, the second coming of Michael Jordan is available. You know what I mean? Like, I think that you have to go ahead and keep a realistic mindset of what this team is. And that was my biggest concern, is being realistic. What are we trying to accomplish this year? And how can we go ahead and obtain that with what's in the market right now? You don't want to go ahead and make any drastic moves that aren't really going to move the needle for you this year, or maybe even next year. The league's constantly changing, constantly evolving. I like what they did. I like that they went ahead and added a piece that they desperately needed. This Knicks team needed a closer. They needed someone they can trust to have the ball in their hand. And Josh Hart plays incredible on both ends of the court. He'll give you points offensively. He's going to give you excessive effort defensively, and for all 4 quarters that he's in the game. I mean, his stat line, 13 and 5 last night, doesn't even go ahead and showcase the full spectrum of how he impacted that game. And that's what you need, someone who's willing to go ahead and just do what needs to be done on both ends of the court. And that's what Josh Hart brings. So I absolutely love the acquisition. And I think it's just the piece that this Knicks team needed to take what they already have, because there's a lot of magic happening on this court. I know sometimes it's hard to see with the ups and downs that sometimes this team goes through, but I think this is the perfect piece to add some stability and really push them to the next level, so that next season, regardless of what happens, at the end of the playoffs, if they win the series or whatever, you have a really good foundation to really start capitalizing and building from.
I think just to follow up on what Ashley said, Ian, is as you accumulate, and you know this better than anyone, as you accumulate positive and good assets and good players, it increases your chances to get that home run hitter that you need to win a championship. You look at the players who win championships in this league, it's LeBron James, Giannis, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. If you don't have one of those players, you're probably not going to win a championship in the NBA. So how do you get one of those players? And that's really the reason why LeBron, when he had a chance, and Durant and others didn't sign with the Knicks in recent years, is because the roster wasn't good enough. Their chances to contend weren't good enough to entice those players to sign on, or at least force a trade to New York. And so when you have a Brunson who looks like he's going to play at an all-star level for a fairly long time, and you bring in really good complementary pieces like Hart, that enhances your opportunity to finally, in the next, say, year, 2 years, 3 years, land one of those players. And I think that's more important in the big picture than anything.
Yeah, Katie didn't come to the Knicks, but I don't know if he regrets going to the Nets. It wasn't like the grass was greener across the bridge. You know what I'm saying? So whatever.
Man, interesting times across the river, Ashley, in your native borough. But I'll say too that, like, you look at that, Ian, you look at the complementary pieces, and you talk about Brunson. To me, Brunson strikes me as a player that others would want to play with because of his style. He's not a traditional pass first point guard, but he certainly creates opportunities for his teammates, and he's a winner. So I think he would attract talent here. We do have a fan question, though, I want to get to from Craig V. Craig V wants to know, will Tom Thibodeau keep a 9-man rotation when Mitchell Robinson returns? Who would be out? My guess is Tom Thibodeau sticks with the 9-man rotation. He didn't expand it to 10 guys. when Josh Hart was acquired. I don't think he expands it to 10 guys when Mitchell Robinson comes back. I would assume Jericho Sims is the odd man out, and that's not a reflection of his play because I think he and Hartenstein have done a great job during Robinson's absence, but it's a more so a reflection of Hartenstein really finding his footing with that second unit. So I would assume that's the way Tom Thibodeau goes. And Ian O'Connor has written books on the top subjects in American pro sports. I mean, Derek Jeter, Bill Belichick. There's so many. We talked about Sebastian Telfair before the show. Ian, I would love to read a book written by you on Tom Thibodeau because I think there's so much there, man, that you as a incredible reporter would just be able to get into. And Tom Thibodeau, a lightning rod topic for Knicks fans. Ashley, I want to know for you first, how do you assess Tom Thibodeau's job that he's done this year so far?
I mean, it's a Tom Thibodeau performance. I mean, there's going to be ups and downs with it. You know, there's frustrations with the way that he tends to coach, the way he tends to distribute minutes, his lack of substitutions or, you know, too many substitutions just at the wrong moments within the game. So I think that always comes with Tom Thibodeau. But I think you also have to look at the Knicks team as a whole. I think that you're trying to figure out the formula that works, and you're trying to do that with what's available. And before Josh Hart got there and before Jalen Brunson got there, you know, he was trying to make do with what he has. And I think you also have to give the coach a level of growing pains as well, just like you do the team. It's about figuring out who's best, what formula works best together, what group of guys works best together, and at what moment of the game does that work. So although there are levels of frustration with Tibbs, like I mentioned, you know, just a few seconds ago, I think that you also have to realistically look at what the situation is and accept the fact that just like this team is trying to figure it out on the court, he's trying to figure out the formulas from where he's coaching, from, you know, the sidelines, from the bench. And I think it's a little bit of give and take. But I will say there are areas in Tom Thibodeau's game that or his coaching style that are just outdated, and he has to just come into the future with them because it's not the 90s anymore. It's 2023. So
very fair analysis. I think, Ashley, one thing that I think when I think about Thibodeau is he's done his job with the Knicks. He has accomplished his goal, maybe not his goal, but I think organizationally the goal here, Tom Thibodeau, you bring him in to help establish a culture, to build a winning foundation. And in my mind, I mean, it's not going to happen, but you let go of Tom Thibodeau tomorrow, he has succeeded in his job in getting the Knicks to a place where there's a foundation in place that they can build off of. They've got a winning foundation in place. And to me, you talk about his flaws all you want. You got to give Tom Thibodeau credit for
Absolutely.
that. That's a really hard thing to do in this league, and he's done it. Ian, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Thibodeau's job this year and what you think of him in terms of right now and then moving forward with the Knicks.
I would say, Ian, so far Tibbs is good, not great. I think he had a great first year in not just putting a competent product on the floor, which obviously Knicks fans had been looking for a long time, but really giving New Yorkers something to cheer for as the city tried to pull out of the death grip of the pandemic. And I don't think what that Knicks team did for the city of New York can ever be forgotten, really. And what Randall, the way he played, and I think the city needed that at that time. Year two was a real disappointment and a step back. And although most of the focus was on Randall, who had a mess of a season, Thibodeau has to take some responsibility for that. Part of your chief responsibility as a head coach is getting the best out of your best players, and he did not do that with Randall. Mm-hmm. And so I think Tibbs has to take a hit on that. Year three has been a nice rebound for him. And look, overall, he's a guy who's won 57% of his games in this league. He is one of the better head coaches in the league. He's not the best. But if he wants to be considered the best or one of the best, he has to win a championship. And I think when I think of what Tibbs has done and not done so far, as far as establishing a program, I actually go back to the 1990s and the Yankees. Joe Torre arrived in 96 and won 4 World Series in 5 years. But before that, Buck Showalter built that organization to a point from incompetence to competence. And he got the Yankees back to the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. And then he had a conflict with George Steinbrenner, and things got a little sideways, and he's out and Joe Torre's in. So is Thibodeau going to be Buck Showalter, where at the end, just like in Chicago and Minnesota, there were bad exits, conflict with management or ownership or both? Or is he going to be able to stick this out and ride out the storms that will come? There are going to be some more bumps in the road here as the Knicks try to get from a playoff team to a serious championship contender. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch Tibbs try to build a championship program and also survive the turbulence that's likely to be part of that process.
And just quickly, I mean, we can't ignore the fact, I agree, good, not great, but we can't ignore the fact that this team responds to Tibbs. And sometimes that is priceless. This is a group of guys who, when you hear them, for the most part, speak about him, it's never an undertone of they don't like him, they don't respect him. You know, Julius Randle speaks very highly of him. You know, there have been multiple guys who have gone on the record and defended him when the media has been hard on him. And that level of respect and that level of continuity and that foundation of not having a revolving door of personnel and being able to really gel and develop a relationship with your head coach is so important, especially for a Knicks team that has gone through head coaches like ring up charges on my Amex. You need some stability. Okay, so let's not ignore that either.
Well, if I could just follow Ashley on that for a second, I remember a couple of years ago talking to John Lucas III, who played for Tibbs, coached with him, and I thought he was a good resource. And he said, players love this guy. Yeah. He said, I think the media's perception of him is different than player perception of him. And he said once when I first met him, he asked me what kind of player I thought I was. And John Lucas III, he was a small guard who could score. And he said, I feel like I'm like Allen Iverson. And he said, Tibbs was like, get out of here. You're not Iverson. What you really need to do is look at Dana Barros, a small guard who was a scorer, who found a way to stay in the league for X amount of years. And Lucas said, Tibbs is a coach who will manage your expectations without destroying your dream. So he can communicate with players. He can inspire players with some brutal honesty. And I actually think the vast majority of players in the NBA want to be coached and coached in a hard way. Now, do I think Tibbs at times over the years has stepped over the line and probably been too unforgiving and relentless in his approach? Yes, I do. I think now that he's gotten older and this is his third time around, I know he told a friend of his who told me, I don't want to bleep up this opportunity. And he realizes this is probably his last chance to be a head coach in the NBA at his age, to win a championship. So I actually think his approach with the Knicks has not been quite as joyless as it appeared with the Bulls and with Minnesota. I think he's actually gotten a touch kinder and gentler in practice. And even game night at times, it doesn't happen often, but I've seen an expression on his face that looks like he's actually enjoying this.
Tibbs.
So I do think he has tweaked his approach a little bit towards being a more user-friendly head coach.
I think the idea that he's some big confrontational monster with players, I don't think that's accurate based on what I've heard. And I think that maybe that's a sign of how Thibodeau has changed over the coaching stops, Chicago, Minnesota to now. But I don't think he's in there getting in everybody's face, yelling at them. I don't think that's the case. Look, you're never going to win a popularity contest as the head coach of a professional sports team, particularly I think in New York, where there's such a scrutiny on everybody involved. So I don't think it's a universal love fest between Tom Thibodeau and each Knick there, but I don't think that would be the case with any coach. So just speaking specifically to coach-player relationships, I think that's relevant. And I do think that when some people internally look at this thing in a big picture sense, they at least wonder hey, is Tom Thibodeau the guy to get us to a certain point? And then is it another coach to get us to that next point? Because it's rare that you can find a coach that can take a team from the basement and then go all the way to winning a title with them. It's not usually the case in the NBA. But I think beware of what you wish for, because you could see with the Nets how that could go wrong. Kenny Atkinson to Steve Nash, that didn't work. Golden State, you saw it, Mark Jackson, Steve Kerr, that worked phenomenally. So I think there, at least internally, that's kind of a thought, but I think you have to be careful with that next step if you do make that move. And also, I don't think it would end acrimoniously with Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks. I'm sure he wouldn't want to be like let go, obviously, but I think they would find a place for him within the organization if the Knicks were ever to move on and find another head coach. All issues to deal with another day here, but Tom Thibodeau does have an issue that a fan has brought up now. Dr. D-Roy Bramwell has a question. He wants to know, what are the Knicks going to do with RJ Barrett in his recent slump? Should he be sent to the bench? Ashley, I'm going to throw it to you. What do you think about the Barrett situation? How would you handle it?
So we've seen this with RJ Barrett before, right? He's gone through slumps before, and he somehow always pulls himself out of it. We forget he's so young, just 22 years old, and it kind of comes with the growing pains of being a young player. You're still figuring out who you are as an individual and who you are as a player, and how that is implemented within a team, existence, within a chemistry. So it's not like we haven't seen this before. Now, on the other side of that, he has been within this Knicks organization for a while. So you do expect a little bit more stability from his game. I think also with the acquisition of Josh Hart, now that's another fire that's under him to kind of go ahead and create that level of stability, because you already see that somebody is now on the team that can do what you do, and can do it, at least for now, we've seen at a more consistent basis. I mean, their stat lines yesterday were almost identical versus RJ getting a couple of more points on the board. So I think that it's a little bit of both. I don't know if you send him to the bench because you don't know what that does to a player's confidence, especially a player as young as RJ Barrett. But I do think you kind of subtly let him know that he needs to figure it out a lot quicker than maybe he has done in the past, because there is somebody who can go ahead and give us what we need on a nightly basis if you're not capable of doing it. Remember, RJ Barrett, for a very long time, was supposed to be the future of this Knicks team. This was the guy that this team was going to build around in the near future. It's now time to showcase that assessment of him and his capabilities was not inaccurate, because he can give this team what they need on a consistent basis. The time is of the essence, and the time is now for him to show that.
Ian, where are you on RJ and the current slide that he seems to be in?
It's a disappointing season so far. You look at his numbers; they're pretty much the same. Obviously, he's not shooting the 3-point shot like he did 2 years ago when he made 40% of his attempts. He's not even close to that. I think it's really difficult, Ian, to be a big-time star in the NBA at 6'6" when you're not a great outside shooter and you're not a really explosive athlete. I think you need to be one of those two things. So I think the ceiling on just how good this guy can be probably isn't what the Knicks and their fan base really hoped it would be. I do think he can be a good player in this league for a long time, maybe a very good player, but not a great one. And as far as the Knicks trying to win a championship in the next 3-4 years, that's going to compromise their chances of doing that. So I could be wrong. He's got a great work ethic. There's no doubt about that. I know Mike Krzyzewski loved him at Duke. In writing a book about Coach K and talking to so many people in that Duke program, they really thought he would do a good job in New York. And I think he has for the most part. You can't argue with the way he prepares and carries himself. And he's been a good player. But when you look at now the player efficiency ratings in the NBA, I think Brunson's top 30. I think Randall's top 40 in the league. And RJ Barrett's not in the top 200 in that category. So that's a problem. He's definitely a better player than that. And so it's a matter of, to me, becoming a better 3-point shooter. He can go to the basket. He is good. He's a good athlete, just not a great explosive one. So I think just becoming a more efficient outside shooter is going to be his path to becoming what the Knicks hoped he would be when they drafted him.
I'm going to throw another hypothetical at you guys. Ashley, top of your list when I say to you, the Knicks will make the playoffs, finish top 6 and not in that play-in if X happens. What's at the top of your list?
They go into every game believing they can win regardless of their opponent. I think that was the thing that stood out to me the most in that 4th seed year. This was a team that did not have all the assets that other team that they were playing had, but every time they stepped on that court, they believed that they could beat you. Regardless if you were more talented, regardless of what superstar was across from them, they believed that they could beat you. And we lost that the season after that. And I think that you see it in glimpses this season. They step on that court, they play 4 quarters of basketball, they give, 4 quarters of effort. And I think that's the secret because look, this Knicks team doesn't have a team of superstars like some of the other guys. It's not Phoenix. You don't have a bunch of Hall of Famers on a team together. But I think it's all mentality for this Knicks team. And I think that with, like I said, KD and Kyrie now out of the conference, the Nets, still trying to figure it out. That fifth seed is more obtainable than ever. And if this team can go in with the mindset, listen, we may not have the names, but we have the talent. I think that makes all the difference in what this team looks like in come playoffs.
Ian, how about you? What's your biggest X factor if the Knicks are going to go ahead and finish the regular season as a playoff team?
I think if Brunson just stays healthy and they keep doing what they're doing, they'll make the top 6 and I think get to 5, which gives them a good chance to win a first round playoff series. I really do believe that. And I really like what Hart has brought to the team to date. And I think that what you have in Brunson is something that the Knicks just haven't had in so long. It's really a player you can build around at that position. And New Yorkers, as you know, love few things like they love point guards. And it's just for whatever reason, I don't even know why that is, but New York has always had this romantic feeling about the point guard position from high school to college and the pros. And the Knicks have really struggled at that position. And to have someone you can believe in, and I think he'll be here now for the next 10 years or so, that you can build around. And as you mentioned earlier, that can attract free agents and other elite players in the league because they'll want to play for him. And one thing that I wanted to point out is when Randall was named to the All-Star team and he wasn't, Brunson said the right things. And a lot of players would say the right things in that situation. But you could tell he meant it, that he was happy for Julius. And that as much as deep down, it probably stung him to not at least initially make the All-Star team. You could tell he generally felt good for a player who had a tough year last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Brunson comes in and really helped elevate him back to that all-star level. And I think that players around the league saw the way he responded to that. They read the things he said, and you could tell it came from the heart. So I think if Brunson is Brunson and he's healthy, the Knicks will make the playoffs and they'll have a pretty good opportunity to win a first-round series.
Well, you guys are definitely the Putback's X factor into having a good show. We really appreciate you guys jumping on and sharing your Knick insights with us. Ashley, Ian, thank you so much. For us, we're going to take a little bit of an all-star break ourselves, but we will be back Thursday, March 2nd, 1 p.m. live with another edition of the Putback, and we'll see you then.